Hi, I'm Greg Gutfeld, along with Kennedy, Harold Ford Jr., Jesse Waters, and the last time she did an Easter egg hunt, she ended up on a milk carton. Dana Perino, The Five. Democrats are losing their minds after President Trump laid out his next steps in Iran last night. Trump telling Americans the end is near. We just need a few more weeks of blowing stuff up.
We are on track to complete all of America's military objectives shortly, very shortly. We're going to hit them extremely hard over the next 2 to 3 weeks. We're going to bring them back to the Stone Ages where they belong. Every American can look forward to a day when we are finally free from the wickedness of Iranian aggression and the specter of nuclear blackmail.
But Democrats started complaining before 47 even took the podium.
So I'm not going to be able to watch the president's address tonight. But here's the thing. He brought America into a war that people do not want.
It was concise, intelligent, and brought the nation together with shared purpose. April Fools.
He sounded and looked quite old, quite low energy, quite exhausted.
Just more magical thinking that an aerial reign of terror on Iran is somehow going to solve the problem that we created.
He's senile and he's downright sleepy.
We know nothing more about that after this ridiculous, rambling speech.
But those loudmouths missed the point. Trump wasn't talking to you, dummies.
If you're someone who has not been paying close attention or not listening directly to the president, yes, it probably did provide you some sense of a refresh. But for those that have been following this closely here in the United States, around the world, there wasn't much new in this address.
You know what's funny, Dana, is when I was watching, I was like, oh, yeah, this isn't for me. You know, we live and breathe through this stuff 8 or 9 hours a day. But ironically, it is for people like Kamala, who don't know what the hell's going on, and she didn't even watch.
I think that it's
ungrateful.
Right. Well, and also it shows it that she had already made up her mind what the speech was going to be before she even heard it.
Yeah.
So, and that is not good for a healthy democracy. It's not good for civic conversation, and it's not good for somebody who is apparently still wants to be in some sort of leadership there. I thought one of the most important things for the speech was, yes, talking to people who aren't online all the time, because President Trump does post a lot on Truth Social and then on X. He says a lot of those same things during the day when people are working, and he's live on cable. He does a lot of interviews like with the press. But if you are out there living your life, finishing work, getting home, making sure the kids get to soccer practice, getting home, and then cleaning, making sure they brush their teeth, go to bed, and then you might catch 20 minutes of the news. And of course, you have to watch Gutfeld. You might not exactly feel that you have an understanding as to why are we in Iran and why is gas prices up $1.25 over a month ago. So he did have to talk to them. The other thing that was important in the speech is talking about future generations. So he thinks, I believe, in a longer time frame, as I believe most parents do. I'm not a parent, but I get to sit with many of you. And of course, your thoughts are with how is this going to affect my children on every issue? AI, whatever it is, all of these issues, the debt, taxes, how is it going to affect my children? And he addressed that as well. The media is obsessed with the timeline, partly because he is. He keeps saying 2 to 3 weeks, 4 weeks. He's saying we've won, it's over, but it's just a few more weeks, et cetera. He's malleable on that. I think that's fine. But the media wants a specific timeline, and he is not going to satiate their needs by saying, yes, absolutely, by next Wednesday, it's over.
Right. They don't deserve a timeline. You know, Harold, I was shocked when you said in the green room, you couldn't have done a better speech than that. And you were like speechless, literally.
It is good to be back around the table with everybody. It seems like it's been a month. It's good to see Jesse. I hadn't seen him in a while.
Really?
What about me?
I saw you guys right before.
Wow, Harold.
I know, but I hadn't seen Jesse even a week before that. It's good to be with you. I'd say a couple things. I think more people pay attention to war than we think. Do they know? Have they been paying attention to it like we have? Probably not. Dana touched on why it is really impacting, and why I think a lot of people have been watching is because they've seen the price of gas rise in the last month by $1.10 on average. And if you're not buying the high-end gas or the whatever the top-level gas is, you're seeing as you're driving around wherever you may live, $4.50, $5. Some people even on the West Coast, $6 and $6 for a gallon of gas. Democrats and Republicans both pay the same amount for gas. Republicans don't get a break because there's a Republican president. Democrats don't get a break because their party's yelling about things. We're all dealing with that. And I think that many Americans understand that too. The president should have given this speech 4 weeks ago. As much as I listened to the speech and I've been following it, I didn't hear, not only did I not hear a lot of new there, I didn't hear, I think it's wrong. I think you're right, Dana and Greg, to say we can't provide an end date. But what I did not hear was a strategy. And I keep asking for that. Not that I want to know every iteration, every unfolding of what we're going to do, but the president rightly praised the military execution. I mean, it's expected almost now that our execution of our military exercises are flawless. From all the times the president's been in office, from 4 years ago to now, we've never had a time when they were not flawless. I'm happy that is the case. We had concerns about DEI perhaps diminishing our military. In fact, it did not. It maybe even helped. But that's another conversation. The real issue here is the Strait of Hormuz. The president made clear last night that we're going to leave and other countries should step up and do their part to open it. I remind all of us, and Dana has certainly commented on this in the past, we both know this is a global market, oil is. You don't get to pick and choose the price of where you're going to buy it because it's set by a global marketplace. We shouldn't kid ourselves. The president is most interested in this, in talking about this as much as he does, and shifting a little bit the narrative because the American people are paying more at the pump. And if there is ever an issue in my lifetime that has determined or dictated more political outcomes than the price of gas, I'd be happy for someone to inform and educate me what that might be. Finally, Democrats, don't applaud the lack of the fact that there's not a clear narrative here. We are all Americans here, and we will all have to deal with the repercussions and ramifications of whatever happens or whatever does not happen. I don't like that part of the politics of it, and both sides are guilty of it, but my party is probably a little more guilty right now because the president is struggling. But if the president wants America and all of us to rally around him, you got to figure out how you reach not only a military strategy, but how you bring about a diplomatic and, for that matter, resolution to this matter.
Did you hear that, Jesse, where he snuck in the president is struggling? Do you think that's the case? I think this is he knows.
I didn't mean to sneak that in. I meant that frontally. I'm sorry. I wasn't sneaking things I said.
I think that he is well aware that the price of gas goes up, but he's playing a longer game.
And he's asking for patience. And the public will give him that patience, but only after maybe 1 or 2 more, 3 more weeks. I listened to the chattering class, Greg. Are we in the chattering class, brother?
No, not me.
Not us.
We're actually number 1 in the chattering.
Well, the chattering class said the president was low energy. What did they want him to do? Do the YMCA? I mean, it's in the Oval Office address at 9 o'clock.
It is the gay national anthem, Jesse.
Excuse me.
And they covered for Joe Biden, who was not low energy.
They never called Joe low energy once, so that's just crazy. So it's designed to be reassuring and informative. And it's for, as you mentioned, Dana, the people that watch Survivor. Kamala and Colbert both didn't watch it, both trashed it. Greg, you said the other day, the definition of intelligence is being open-minded.
Did I say that?
You're so smart, you forgot it.
I was very intelligent.
Oh, really?
But you gotta, I mean, that just makes them so dumb. And hopefully the rest of the country was open-minded because it could hear him lay out the facts that Iran was a threat, that Barack blew it by giving them money that they built missiles with, and that the United States is teed up from drill, baby, drill, lowering inflation in Venezuela to survive the short-term supply shock and get through this. And he didn't trash NATO. He basically politely invited them to deal with the strait. Now, the issue here, and I agree with Harold, is that for the last 80 years, the United States' role in the world, the bedrock of U.S. policy, is to maintain the free flow of oil all over the place. So then all of a sudden Trump was like, hey, French, can you guys get down here? And they were like, what? With what ship? They haven't done anything with the Navy in decades. So to expect them to do that is asking a lot. They're unprepared. But Trump needs to, as he ends this, The ending has to end in the strait being open, one way or the other, by force, by foreign armada, or by ceasefire. That's got to happen. And so I think probably Rubio, he has nothing to do.
There you go.
He'll probably handle it.
Kennedy, I don't know what happened to Seth Moulton, but something happened. But how can they actually comment on Trump's cognition after 4 years of basically doing, well, literally doing a cover-up of Joe Biden's, complete meltdown?
Because they never acknowledged what we saw with Joe Biden. They never acknowledged the cognitive decline and the harm it was doing to the country and to his party and his presidency and his legacy and everything else. They thought that they would whitewash it with the help of people like Jake Tapper before he decided to make a bunch of money and write a book. And because that failed spectacularly and it damaged their party and they lost the presidency because they didn't want to gamble on an open primary. So now they've got 4 years of Trump and they think all they have to do is say the opposite of whatever Trump has chosen to do, whether it is Mark Wayne Mullen or what's going on in Iran. And there are innumerable reasons to be against war. And there are a number of reasons if your guy is in office to talk him out of something like this, because so much can go so wrong. Having said that, people like Kamala Harris and people like Seth Moulton will never be taken seriously, because it's not enough to say, well, Trump's not going to say anything, or what Trump said was stupid, and that's the end of the story. No, there's more to the story, because what's going on in Iran is incredibly consequential and very dangerous. So I want to know if this isn't the right thing to do, and maybe it's not. I will grant them that. What is the right thing to do? Like, how do you open up a diplomatic channel? If you become President Moulton, what are you going to do with Iran? You know, they were essentially the hegemon of the Middle East. So could you have done this more quickly? Would you have had ground troops? Would you have ignored the 45,000 people who were slaughtered in the streets? Because even if you don't think war is the answer, what is the answer? And that is something that they will not address out of cowardice and laziness.
Excellent point by Kennedy. All right, you can go home early.
Thank you.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube, and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.